The smell hit me first, acrid, choking, wrong. I jolted awake at 2:37 in the morning to find my bedroom filled with a thin gray haze that made my throat burn. For a confused moment, I thought I was dreaming. Then the smoke detector finally screamed to life, and my heart kicked into a gallop that made my chest hurt. I stumbled out of bed, disoriented, my bare feet hitting the hardwood floor as I tried to process what was happening. The hallway was worse, much worse. Thick smoke poured from downstairs, and I could hear it now. The crackling, hungry sound of fire consuming everything I owned. 28 years in this house. Every memory of my marriage to Richard, every birthday party, every Christmas morning. All of it burning. I didn't think. I grabbed my purse from the dresser and my phone from the nightstand. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold anything. The smoke was getting thicker, making me cough until my ribs ached. I made it down the stairs, staying low like they teach you. And when I rounded the corner to see the kitchen, my legs nearly gave out. Flames covered half the wall, licking up toward the ceiling with terrifying speed. The electrical panel I'd begged my landlord to fix 6 months ago was the epicenter, sparking and smoking like something from a nightmare. I ran. Through the living room, out the front door, into the November cold wearing nothing but my nightgown and slippers. The air outside was so sharp it hurt my lungs, but I couldn't stop coughing, couldn't catch my breath. Mrs. Patterson from next door was already on her porch in her robe, phone pressed to her ear. She was calling 911. I stood on the sidewalk, hugging myself against the cold, watching orange light flicker in my downstairs windows. My home. The place where I'd nursed Richard through his final days. The place where I'd raised my boys. My boys. The thought hit me like a physical blow. I needed help. I needed somewhere to go. My fingers were numb as I unlocked my phone, squinting at the too bright screen. It was 2:43 in the morning. Dylan lived 20 minutes away in that massive house he was always posting about on social media. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, a guest suite he bragged about whenever Kristen hosted her influencer friends. My son, my firstborn. He would help. I pressed his name in my contacts, trying to stop my teeth from chattering. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Come on, Dylan, please. On the 5th ring, he answered, his voice thick with sleep and irritation. What? Mom, it's almost 3 in the morning. Dylan, thank God, My voice cracked and I had to stop to cough. Dylan, the house is on fire. It's really bad. The whole kitchen is burning and I don't know what to do. You're kidding. His voice went from sleepy to sharp. Not concerned, sharp. Annoyed, sharp. Are you serious right now? Yes, I'm serious. I'm standing outside in my nightgown and the fire department isn't here yet and I don't have anywhere to... Jesus Christ. I heard rustling, then Kristen's voice in the background, high-pitched and irritated. It's your mom? Seriously, Dylan, what time is it? More rustling. Then my son's voice, slightly muffled like he'd pulled the phone away from his mouth. Yeah, apparently her house is on fire or something. The or something hit me like a slap, like he thought I might be making it up, like this was some ploy for attention. Dylan, I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though I was shaking so hard my vision was blurring. I need to come to your house, just for tonight, just until I can figure out... Mom. He cut me off, and his tone made my stomach drop. It was the voice he used with difficult clients. Patient, but firm. Detached. You need to call your insurance company. Find a hotel. This isn't really a good time for us. I couldn't speak, couldn't process what I was hearing. Behind me, I could hear sirens approaching, but they sounded distant, unreal. Everything felt unreal, except Dylan's words. You made your choices, Mom, he continued when I didn't respond. You always did what you wanted, spent your money how you wanted. You can't just call me in the middle of the night expecting me to drop everything and rescue you. I have a life. We have plans tomorrow. Kristen's mom is coming over for brunch and... Dylan, I'm standing on the sidewalk watching my house burn down. My voice came out as a whisper. I have nowhere to go. That's not my problem. The words were so cold, so final, that for a moment I forgot about the fire entirely. You were always so dramatic. Figure it out yourself for once, and stop using me as your backup plan. You spent your whole life putting other people first, right? Made yourself into this martyr? Well, congratulations. Now you get to deal with the consequences. There was a pause, and then, I'm going back to sleep. Don't call again tonight. The line went dead. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, unable to move. The sirens were getting louder. Mrs. Patterson was hurrying over with a blanket, concern etched on her elderly face. But all I could hear was my son's voice. That's not my problem. Don't call again. The son I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through every childhood illness, worked double shifts to send to good schools. The son whose first word was mama. That son had just told me that watching my life burn down wasn't his problem. The fire trucks arrived in a chaos of flashing lights and shouting voices. Firefighters jumped out, unrolling hoses, asking me questions I could barely answer. Was anyone else inside? No. Did I know how it started? The electrical panel. The one I'd reported. The one that got ignored. Mrs. Patterson wrapped the blanket around my shoulders and tried to guide me to her porch, but I couldn't move. I just stood there, watching water arc through my broken windows, steam rising to meet the smoke. By 4 a.m, half the neighborhood was awake, standing in their yards in pajamas and coats, watching the show. The fire was mostly contained, but the damage was catastrophic. Through the front windows, I could see my living room, what was left of it. The couch where Richard and I used to watch old movies. The bookshelf I'd painted myself. The family photos on the wall. All of it destroyed or water damaged beyond repair. The fire chief, a kind-looking man in his 50s, came over to tell me what I already knew. The house was uninhabitable, structurally compromised. I couldn't go back inside, not tonight, maybe not ever. Do you have somewhere you can stay? He asked gently, and I realized I was crying. When had I started crying? Family? Friends? I opened my mouth to say yes, but nothing came out. Dylan's words were still echoing in my head. That's not my problem. Mrs. Patterson was offering her guest room again, bless her heart, but she was 73 and living on a fixed income in a tiny 2-bedroom. I couldn't impose like that. My cousin lived in Maine, my college roommate in California. Everyone else was a casual acquaintance, not someone you called at 4 a.m. asking for a place to live. Everyone except Mateo. The thought of calling him made my chest tighten with shame. I'd sworn I would never be a burden to him, never cash in on the gratitude he'd expressed 1,000 times over the years. He'd built an empire from nothing. Well, not nothing. From the love and sacrifice I'd given him, yes, but from his own brilliant mind and relentless work ethic. Titan Shield was worth billions now. Mateo Rivera, the orphaned 10-year-old I'd taken in 24 years ago, was one of the most successful tech CEOs in the country, and I'd promised myself I would never, ever make him feel obligated to take care of me. But standing there at 4:15 a.m, wrapped in Mrs. Patterson's blanket that smelled like lavender and mothballs, watching firefighters pick through the ruins of my life, I had no choice. I pulled up his contact with trembling fingers. The photo attached to his name showed him at last year's Thanksgiving. Dark eyes warm with laughter, arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning at Dylan's forced attempt to take a decent picture. Back when Dylan still came to family dinners. Back when I still believed my biological son would eventually forgive me for loving someone else's child. The phone rang twice before Mateo answered, voice alert despite the hour. Vivienne? What's wrong? Just hearing him say my name, not Mom, never Mom, though I'd told him 100 times he could call me that, broke something open inside me. Mateo, I'm so sorry to call you like this. I know it's the middle of the night and you're probably... What happened? His voice went sharp with concern. Are you hurt? No, I'm fine. I had to stop and cough again, my lungs still burning from the smoke. My house caught fire. It's bad, Mateo. Really bad. The whole kitchen is gone, and the fire chief says I can't stay here, and My voice broke. I called Dylan first. I did. I called him, and I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the words out loud. Where are you right now? Mateo's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. Are you safe? I'm on the sidewalk outside my house. The fire department is here. They're getting it under control, but don't move. I'm coming to get you. The sound of him moving, footsteps, a door closing. I'm in New York right now. I was closing a deal with the Silverman Group, but I'll be there as fast as I can. Mateo, you don't have to. It's 4 in the morning and you're 3 hours away. I can find a hotel or… Vivienne. He cut me off, and his tone left no room for argument. You called Dylan first? I could hear something dangerous in his voice now. Tell me what he said. I closed my eyes, fresh tears spilling down my cheeks. He said it wasn't his problem. He said I was being dramatic, and I made my choices, and he was going back to sleep. He hung up on me, Mateo. I told him I was standing outside watching my house burn, and he… A sob caught in my throat. He laughed. He actually laughed and said I should figure it out myself for once. The silence on the other end of the line lasted maybe 5 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When Mateo spoke again, his voice was quiet, controlled, and absolutely furious. He did what? Vivienne, you literally lost everything tonight, and he… He stopped himself, and I could hear him taking a breath. No, this ends today. This ends right now. Mateo, please, it's not… I'm taking the helicopter. I'll be there in 45 minutes, less if I can manage it. More sounds of movement, urgent now. Stay with your neighbor if you need to get warm, but don't go anywhere. I'm bringing you back to Boston with me. We'll figure everything else out later. I can't ask you to… You're not asking. I'm telling you. You took me in when I had nothing, when everyone else said to give me up, to let the system handle it. You looked at a terrified 10-year-old kid and said he was coming home with you. You worked yourself to exhaustion to give me the same chances you gave Dylan. You sold your business to pay for your husband's medical bills and never once complained. And when you needed help, when you needed your own son, he laughed at you. His voice cracked slightly. So no, Vivienne, you're not asking me for anything. I'm coming to get you because that's what family does, real family. He hung up before I could argue further. I stood there holding my phone, Mrs. Patterson rubbing my back and murmuring comforting words I couldn't quite hear over the roaring in my ears. Real family. Mateo had said real family. As opposed to what? Fake family? Blood family? The son who shared my DNA but apparently none of my capacity for compassion? The next 40 minutes felt like hours. The firefighters finished their work, declaring the structure unsafe, but the fire fully contained. The fire chief gave me paperwork I couldn't focus on and business cards for disaster relief services. Mrs. Patterson brought me tea I couldn't taste. Other neighbors drifted back to their houses as the excitement died down, leaving me standing in my ruined driveway wrapped in a borrowed blanket, watching the first hints of dawn turn the sky from black to dark blue. And then I heard it. The distinctive whump, whump, whump of helicopter blades cutting through the early morning air. It got louder, closer, until I could see it. A sleek silver helicopter with the Titan Shield logo on its side, descending toward my residential street like something from a movie. My neighbors' houses lit up as people rushed to their windows. This didn't happen in our quiet Boston suburb. Helicopters didn't land on residential streets at 5 in the morning. But Mateo Rivera's helicopter did. It touched down in the middle of the street, the downdraft from the rotors sending ash and debris and fallen leaves swirling into the air. The door opened before the blades even stopped spinning, and Mateo jumped out, still wearing the suit he'd been wearing for his business meeting in New York. His hair was disheveled from the flight, his tie slightly loosened, but his eyes, those dark, intense eyes, found mine immediately through the lingering smoke and chaos. He walked straight toward me, and I saw his jaw tighten as he took in my appearance. Nightgown, bare legs, slippers, smoke-stained face, Mrs. Patterson's threadbare blanket around my shoulders, everything I owned reduced to a purse and a phone. He didn't say anything at first, just reached me, pulled off his suit jacket, a jacket that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and wrapped it around my shoulders over the blanket. It was warm from his body heat and smelled like his cologne, cedar, and something crisp. Then he looked me directly in the eyes, and in a voice that carried across the street, loud enough for every single neighbor watching from their windows to hear, Mateo Rivera said 3 words that would change everything. You're coming home. I didn't argue with him. Couldn't argue, really, with the way he was looking at me, like I was something precious that had been damaged and he was furious about it. He guided me toward the helicopter with a gentle hand on my back, nodding to the pilot who was already preparing for takeoff. Mrs. Patterson pressed a hasty kiss to my cheek and promised to keep an eye on the house, though we both knew there wasn't much house left to watch. The flight to Boston was only 20 minutes, but it gave me time to think, time to remember. Mateo sat beside me in the plush leather seat, his hand covering mine, not speaking, just being present. And in that silence, the memories flooded back, not of tonight's horror, but of how we got here, how a successful architect's wife in her 30s ended up raising two boys who would grow into such different men. It started 24 years ago, on an ordinary Tuesday in March. Dylan was 8 years old then, a bright, happy child who loved soccer and building elaborate Lego cities on our living room floor. Richard was working long hours at his engineering firm, and I was running my landscape architecture business from home, trying to balance motherhood and career like every other woman I knew. We were comfortable, happy, normal. Carla Rivera had been cleaning our house twice a week for 3 years. She was a quiet woman from El Salvador, maybe 40 years old, with work-worn hands and the saddest smile I'd ever seen. She spoke broken English but cleaned like an artist, and she always brought her son Mateo with her during summer breaks and school holidays. He was a serious little boy with enormous dark eyes, usually sitting at our kitchen table doing workbooks that were years above his grade level, while his mother scrubbed our floors. I remember talking to him sometimes while I worked on design plans. He was fascinated by angles and measurements, would lean over my shoulder and point out where I could optimize space or improve symmetry. 7 years old and already thinking like an engineer. Carla was so proud of him. She told me once in halting English that Mateo would be the first Rivera to go to university, that she was working 3 jobs to save for his education, that everything she did was for him. 3 weeks later, she was dead. Car accident on Route 9. Drunk driver ran a red light. Carla was driving home from her night shift at the hotel, and she died instantly. The police came to our house because we were listed as her emergency contact, the only contact, really, besides her priest. And there was a problem. A 10-year-old problem, sitting in a social worker's sedan outside our house, clutching a backpack and looking at the world with eyes that had gone completely empty. Mateo had no other family in the United States. His father had never been in the picture. Carla's extended family was back in El Salvador, people she hadn't spoken to in years, people who couldn't afford to take in a child even if they wanted to. The social worker, a tired woman named Linda with kind eyes, explained the situation while Mateo sat on our couch, silent and still as a statue. He would go into the foster system. They would try to place him with a Spanish-speaking family if possible. They would do their best. I looked at this child I'd known for 3 years. This brilliant, quiet boy who had just lost the only person in the world who loved him, and I heard my own voice saying, "He can stay here." Richard blinked. Linda blinked. Even Dylan, who had been hiding at the top of the stairs listening, made a small sound of surprise. But the words were out there, and I meant them with every fiber of my being. "We have a guest room," I continued, speaking faster now, afraid someone would interrupt and tell me all the reasons this was impossible. "He knows us. He's comfortable here. We can give him stability while you sort out the legal situation, however long it takes." Linda looked doubtful. "Mrs. Hartwell, emergency foster placement requires background checks, home studies, training." "Then start them." I surprised myself with the steel in my voice. "Today. Right now. But that boy is not leaving this house to sleep in some stranger's home tonight. He just lost his mother. He needs—" I stopped, my throat closing up. "He needs to be somewhere that feels safe." Richard, bless him, backed me up immediately. "We'll do whatever paperwork is necessary, whatever requirements you have. But Vivienne's right. Mateo stays here." It took 6 weeks to get emergency foster approval. 6 weeks of background checks and interviews and home inspections. 6 weeks of Mateo sleeping in our guest room, barely speaking, barely eating, just sitting at the kitchen table doing his workbooks with tears silently running down his face. Dylan was confused at first, then resentful when he realized this wasn't a temporary sleepover. Richard tried to balance both boys' needs, giving Dylan extra attention while I focused on drawing Mateo out of his grief. The breaking point came on a Saturday morning, 2 months after Carla's death. I found Mateo in the garage at 6 a.m., trying to fix my broken lawnmower. When I asked what he was doing, he looked up at me with those devastated eyes and said, "My mama always fixed things to earn extra money. I should fix things too, to pay you back for letting me stay." He was 10 years old. 10 years old and trying to earn his keep by repairing lawnmowers before dawn. I sat down on the garage floor in my bathrobe and pulled him into my arms, and he finally broke down and sobbed like the child he was. We sat there for an hour while he cried himself out, and when he was done, I looked him in the eye and said, "You don't owe me anything. You're not a guest earning room and board. You're staying because I want you here, because you deserve to be here. Do you understand?" He nodded, but I could see he didn't believe me. It would take years before he truly believed it. The permanent adoption paperwork was filed 4 months later. Richard's brother Michael thought we were insane. "You have your own son," he said at a family barbecue where Dylan was sulking and Mateo was sitting alone under a tree. "Why would you take on someone else's kid? The expense, the complications, you don't owe his mother anything." I never spoke to Michael again after that day. Dylan's resentment grew slowly, like mold in a dark corner. At first, he was just jealous of the attention. Normal sibling rivalry, everyone said. But it was more than that. Dylan saw every sacrifice we made for Mateo as something stolen from him. When I took extra design projects to pay for Mateo's math tutor, Dylan complained that I was never home. When Richard helped both boys with homework, Dylan got frustrated that Mateo needed so much help with English. When we celebrated Mateo's citizenship ceremony the same week as Dylan's 13th birthday, Dylan accused us of caring more about that kid than our own son. "That kid has a name," Richard told him firmly. "He's your brother." "He's not my brother," Dylan shot back. "He's just some random person Mom felt sorry for." The divide only deepened as they got older. Mateo excelled at everything he touched, not because he was naturally gifted, but because he worked with an intensity that sometimes scared me. He studied until midnight every night, took every advanced class available, taught himself programming languages from library books. He was driven by a desperate need to prove he was worth the investment we'd made, to prove he deserved to be part of our family. Dylan, on the other hand, coasted. He was smart enough to get B's without trying, charming enough to talk his way out of trouble, confident in a way that came from never having to doubt his place in the world. And when college applications rolled around, the contrast became impossible to ignore. Mateo earned a full scholarship to MIT, full ride, plus a stipend for living expenses, based purely on merit. Dylan got into the state university with partial academic scholarship, which still required us to pay $20,000 a year. Dylan never forgave Mateo for that, even though it made no logical sense, as if Mateo had somehow stolen the full scholarship that Dylan could have earned if only he'd tried harder. But the real breaking point came 8 years ago when Richard got sick. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, discovered too late to do anything but try to buy time. We spent 2 years fighting it. Surgeries, clinical trials, experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. I liquidated my retirement account. Sold my landscape architecture business for a fraction of what it was worth because I needed cash immediately and couldn't wait for a better offer. Took out a second mortgage on the house. Richard left everything to me in his will, not because he didn't love Dylan, but because he wanted to make sure I was taken care of first. Standard estate planning for married couples. But Dylan had somehow convinced himself he would inherit a fortune. When he found out his father left him nothing, that everything went to me to ensure my financial security in widowhood, he was furious. "What about my inheritance?" he demanded at the lawyer's office, 3 days after we buried Richard. "Dad had life insurance, the house, your business sale. Went to pay for your father's medical care," I said quietly, still numb with grief. "The life insurance covered the funeral. There is no inheritance, Dylan. I'm sorry." He looked at me like I'd betrayed him. "You spent it all? Everything?" "I spent it trying to save your father's life. You spent it on him too, didn't you?" Dylan jerked his chin toward Mateo, who was standing quietly in the corner. "All those years, private school, tutors, college applications, that was my inheritance. You gave it away to someone who wasn't even family." Mateo flinched like he'd been slapped. I stood up, anger finally cutting through my grief. "Mateo is family. He has been for 14 years, and you need to leave now." Dylan left. He didn't come to the house again for 6 months, and when he did, he brought Kristen, a pretty, ambitious girl who validated every bitter thought he'd ever had about being neglected and cheated. She called Mateo your mom's charity project at Thanksgiving dinner. Dylan didn't correct her. Meanwhile, Mateo's career exploded. His cybersecurity startup was acquired for $43 million when he was 26. He founded Titan Shield 2 years later, and within 5 years, it was valued at $3.2 billion. Billion with a B. He bought me a car, which I accepted, tried to buy me a house, which I refused, sent me on a Mediterranean cruise for my 55th birthday, called me every Sunday without fail, visited every few weeks when he wasn't traveling. He never called me Mom, though. Always Vivienne. I think he was afraid that claiming the title would somehow diminish what Richard and I had given Dylan, that it would be disrespectful to the son who actually had the right to call me Mom, even if that son rarely used it anymore. The helicopter touched down on the Titan Shield headquarters rooftop pad as the sun was starting to rise. Mateo helped me out, his hand steady on my elbow, and guided me toward the elevator. We rode down 40 floors in silence, and I watched our reflection in the polished steel doors. A successful CEO in a wrinkled suit and a disheveled woman in a nightgown and borrowed jacket, connected by 24 years of love that had never needed the word mother to be real. Mateo's penthouse occupied the top floor of a luxury building 3 blocks from Titan Shield headquarters. I'd been here once before, for a Christmas party 2 years ago that Dylan had refused to attend. Even then, I'd felt out of place among the minimalist furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. Now, arriving at 5:30 in the morning wearing a nightgown and smoke-stained slippers, I felt like an intruder in my own life. "The guest suite is down this hall," Mateo said, leading me past his pristine kitchen with its marble countertops and professional-grade appliances that I suspected rarely got used. "It has its own bathroom. I'll have my assistant bring clothes later today. What size do you wear?" "Mateo, you don't need to—" "Size, Vivienne." His tone was gentle but firm, the same tone I'd used on him when he was 12 and insisted he didn't need a winter coat because coats were expensive. 10, I admitted quietly. Sometimes 12, depending on the brand. He nodded, already typing something into his phone. We reached a door at the end of the hall, and he opened it to reveal a bedroom that was larger than my entire downstairs had been. King-sized bed with hotel-quality linens, sitting area with a velvet sofa, ensuite bathroom visible through another doorway, all gleaming tile and brushed gold fixtures. "There are toiletries in the bathroom," Mateo said. "New toothbrush. Everything you might need. Try to get some rest. I'll be working from home today, so I'll be here if you need anything." He paused in the doorway, studying my face with concern. "Have you eaten?" I couldn't remember my last meal. Dinner yesterday seemed like a lifetime ago. "I'm not hungry. I'll make breakfast anyway. Come out whenever you're ready." He started to leave, then stopped and turned back. His expression was carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. "Vivienne, you're safe here. You know that, right? This isn't temporary emergency housing. You stay as long as you need. Months, years, I don't care. This is your home now, if you want it to be." My throat closed up. I managed to nod, and he left, closing the door softly behind him. I stood in the center of that beautiful, impersonal room and finally let myself acknowledge the full weight of what had happened. My house was gone. My possessions were gone. My son, my biological son, the child I'd carried and birthed and raised, had laughed at my tragedy and told me to figure it out myself. And the boy I'd taken in out of compassion had just offered me a home without hesitation, without conditions, without keeping score. I showered for 40 minutes, standing under water hot enough to hurt, scrubbing at skin that still smelled like smoke. Mateo's assistant must have been working at inhuman speed, because when I emerged from the bathroom wrapped in a plush robe I'd found hanging on the door, there was a knock. A young woman with kind eyes and excellent taste had brought multiple shopping bags from Nordstrom. Jeans, sweaters, undergarments still in packages, comfortable shoes, even a warm coat. "Mr. Rivera said to tell you these are just basics to get you through the next few days," she said, setting the bags on the bed. "We'll arrange a proper shopping trip later this week once you've had time to rest. I'm Sarah, his executive assistant. If you need anything at all, anything, here's my card. My cell number is on there. I mean it, Mrs. Hartwell. 3 a.m. Doesn't matter. You call." I looked at this young woman who didn't know me, offering help with genuine sincerity, and had to blink back tears. "Thank you, Sarah. That's very kind. Mr. Rivera is very clear about priorities," she said with a small smile. "And you're the top one. He's canceled all his meetings for the next week." After she left, I dressed in the soft jeans and cashmere sweater she'd selected. They fit perfectly. Even the bra was the right size. I wondered if Mateo had somehow known, then realized he probably just asked Sarah to figure it out. The efficiency of having resources, the luxury of being able to solve problems with money and staff. Dylan had a fraction of Mateo's wealth and yet had told me to find a hotel. I found Mateo in the kitchen, still wearing his suit pants but having changed into a simple t-shirt. He was making scrambled eggs and toast, and there was fresh coffee in the French press. Such a domestic scene, this tech billionaire cooking breakfast at 6:30 in the morning after rescuing his foster mother from a house fire via helicopter. If you'd told me 24 years ago that this is where we'd end up, I would have laughed. "Sit," he said, nodding toward the breakfast bar. "Coffee?" "Please." I settled onto one of the sleek bar stools and accepted the mug he poured. He added cream without asking. He remembered how I took it. "Mateo, I need to start figuring out—" "No." He cracked another egg into the pan. "You don't need to figure out anything today. Today you're going to eat, rest, and let me handle the logistics. Tomorrow we'll start dealing with insurance, contractors, all of it. But not today. I don't even know if my insurance is current," I admitted, the shame hot on my face. "I missed the last payment. Maybe 2 payments. I kept meaning to catch up, but money's been tight and I thought I had time." Mateo's hand stilled on the spatula. He turned to look at me, and I saw something dangerous flicker across his face. "How long has money been tight?" "It's not— I'm fine, really. It's just that the investments haven't been performing as well as expected, and the property taxes went up, and there were some medical bills from my physical therapy after I fell last year." "You fell? When did you fall? Why didn't you tell me?" His voice had gone sharp. "It was nothing. I slipped on ice in January, bruised my hip, needed a few PT sessions. I'm fine." I wrapped my hands around the coffee mug, avoiding his eyes. "The point is, I've been managing. I just got a little behind on some things." "The insurance wasn't the only thing you were behind on, was it?" He was studying me too carefully now, putting pieces together. "What else?" I didn't want to answer, didn't want to admit how far I'd fallen from the comfortable widow I'd been pretending to be. But he deserved the truth. "Some credit card debt. Not much, just a few thousand. And I had to take out a small home equity line last year to cover some repairs. The water heater died, and then the roof leaked, and— Jesus Christ, Vivienne." He turned off the stove and came around the counter, pulling out the stool next to mine and sitting down so we were eye level. "Why didn't you tell me any of this?" "Because you're not responsible for me," I said firmly. "I took you in because it was the right thing to do, not because I expected a return on investment. You don't owe me financial support. You don't owe me anything. That's not—" He stopped, visibly controlling his frustration. "This isn't about owing. This is about family taking care of family. You would have let yourself lose your house before asking me for help?" I wasn't going to lose the house. I was managing. Even as I said it, I knew how hollow it sounded. The house was gone now anyway, just not in the way I'd feared. Mateo was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then he pulled out his phone and started typing. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Texting my financial advisor. I'm having him set up an account for you. We'll transfer enough to cover all your outstanding debts plus 6 months of living expenses. And before you argue—" He held up a hand as I opened my mouth to protest. "This is non-negotiable. You're not living in uncertainty while I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes. Mateo, you worked 3 jobs to pay for my SAT prep course. You sold your business to pay for Richard's treatment instead of taking him to Mexico for some cheap clinic. You gave me everything I needed to become who I am. So no, Vivienne, you don't get to martyr yourself now. I won't allow it." I felt tears prickling at my eyes again. "I didn't do those things so you'd feel obligated. I know. That's exactly why I want to help." He reached over and squeezed my hand. "Let me take care of you for once. Please." We ate breakfast in silence after that, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who don't need to fill every moment with words. I was exhausted, but couldn't imagine sleeping. My mind kept circling back to the fire, to Dylan's cold voice, to the future I now had to rebuild from nothing. Around 9 a.m., Mateo's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. "It's Dylan." My stomach dropped. "Don't answer it." "Oh, I'm answering it." He accepted the call and put it on speaker. "Dylan, to what do I owe the pleasure? Where is she?" Dylan's voice was tight, angry. "Where's my mother?" "Your mother," Mateo said with emphasis that made it clear what he thought of Dylan's use of the possessive, "is safe. No thanks to you. I saw the neighborhood Facebook group. Someone posted photos of a helicopter landing on her street. That was you, wasn't it? Always have to make a dramatic entrance, show off your money. I made a necessary entrance because someone needed to help her since her own son told her to find a hotel." Mateo's voice was ice. "Did you need something, Dylan? Or are you just calling to criticize my transportation choices? I need to talk to her. Put her on." "No." The word was flat, final. "Excuse me? That's my mother, Rivera. You don't get to keep her from me. Your mother called you at 3 a.m. while her house was burning down, and you hung up on her. You don't get to play concerned son now that it's daylight and socially acceptable." Mateo's jaw was tight. "She's safe, she's taken care of, and she's not taking your call. If she wants to reach out to you later, that's her choice. But I'm not letting you upset her today. You self-righteous piece of—" Dylan's voice was rising. "You've always thought you were better than me, haven't you? The golden child, the grateful little immigrant who made good. Well, she's my mother, my actual biological mother. You're just some kid she felt sorry for." I watched Mateo's face and saw something I'd never seen before. Not anger, but something colder. Disappointment, maybe, or just complete emotional detachment. "You're right," Mateo said quietly. "She is your biological mother, and you abandoned her in her worst moment. So what does that say about you, Dylan?" He paused. "Don't call again unless you're ready to apologize. And even then, it's up to Vivienne whether she wants to hear it." He ended the call before Dylan could respond. "He's going to be furious," I said softly. "Good. Maybe it'll give him a taste of how you felt at 3 a.m. when he laughed at you." Mateo stood up and started clearing our breakfast dishes. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." My heart sank. "What?" "I had my legal team do some digging yesterday after you called. Just routine background checks, seeing if there were any legal complications with the house fire, liens, anything that might complicate rebuilding." He loaded the dishwasher, not looking at me. "They found something. 3 weeks ago, Dylan contacted a law firm specializing in elder law. Specifically, he was inquiring about the process for having someone declared mentally incompetent." The words didn't make sense at first. "What? Why would he—" "To take control of your assets, your house, your investments, any inheritance from your mother that you haven't spent yet. If he could get a judge to declare you incompetent, he could petition to become your legal guardian and manage your finances." Mateo finally turned to look at me, and his expression was stricken. "Vivienne, I think he was planning to use the fire as evidence. An old woman who let her insurance lapse, let her house fall into disrepair with faulty wiring, clearly can't manage her own affairs." I couldn't breathe, couldn't process what he was saying. "Dylan wouldn't— he's my son. He wouldn't try to—" The lawyer he contacted confirmed it, off the record, obviously, since he can't officially tell us about client communications. "But he's friends with one of my attorneys. And when my guy started asking questions, the other lawyer mentioned Dylan had been very interested in protective proceedings for aging parents." Mateo's hands were shaking slightly as he closed the dishwasher. "I'm sorry. I know this is devastating, but you need to know what he was planning." I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. All this time, I'd thought Dylan was just resentful, distant, caught up in his own life and Kristen's influence. But this was active malice. This was planning, scheming, waiting for an opportunity to take control of the little I had left. "The fire," I whispered. He knew about the fire in real time. He was in the neighborhood group chat. He could have come, could have helped. But instead, he saw it as the perfect justification for his incompetence claim. "Old woman nearly dies in preventable house fire due to negligence. Add in the lapsed insurance, the financial struggles you'd been hiding. It would look bad to a judge." Mateo sat down next to me again. "That's why he hung up on you. Why he was so cold. He needed you to be helpless and alone so he could swoop in later as the responsible son taking charge of his incompetent mother's affairs. But you showed up first. The pieces were clicking into place now. And now he can't play the hero because you already did. Now he can't do anything because I'm going to make damn sure you're protected. Mateo pulled out his phone again. I'm having my lawyers draft a power of attorney document, medical and financial, naming me as your agent with explicit exclusion of Dylan. We'll also set up a trust for your assets, with me and an independent trustee managing it. He won't be able to touch anything. Mateo, that's such a huge responsibility. I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm doing it. And frankly, you should have done it years ago. He was scrolling through his contacts. I'm also hiring a private investigator. I want to know everything. When Dylan started planning this, whether Kristen was involved, if there are any other schemes I need to know about, and I'm having security installed at whatever house we find you. Because if Dylan was willing to let you suffer through a house fire for his own gain, I don't trust what else he might do. I wanted to protest, wanted to say he was overreacting, being paranoid, that Dylan wouldn't actually hurt me, but the words wouldn't come because I wasn't sure they were true anymore. My son had heard me sobbing on the phone at 3 a.m. and hung up, had seen photos of my house burning and blocked my number, had been planning for weeks to have me declared incompetent so he could control my money. That wasn't a son. That was a stranger wearing my son's face. The next few days passed in a blur. Mateo's team moved with terrifying efficiency. By Tuesday afternoon, I had a new bank account with more money in it than I'd seen in 8 years. By Wednesday morning, we'd met with insurance adjusters who confirmed what I already knew. My lapsed policy meant I'd get nothing for the house or its contents. But Mateo's lawyers had already started proceedings against my landlord for negligence. The electrical panel I'd reported 6 months ago was a death trap, they said. Multiple code violations. Criminal negligence, possibly. We'd sue for damages. By Thursday, the private investigator's preliminary report arrived. Dylan had been planning the incompetence claim for 5 weeks. He'd consulted 3 different lawyers, looking for one willing to take the case. He'd been researching my finances, somehow accessing my credit report. And yes, Kristen was involved. She'd been the one to suggest it after I'd refused Mateo's offer to buy me a new house 2 years ago. If she won't accept help while she's competent, Kristen had texted Dylan. Maybe she needs someone to make decisions for her. The betrayal cut deeper than the fire ever could. Friday afternoon, Mateo found me standing at the penthouse windows, staring out at Boston Harbor without really seeing it. He came to stand beside me, not touching, but present. I found a house, he said quietly. In Brookline, near Coolidge Corner. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, beautiful garden that needs work. It's in a good neighborhood, walking distance to shops and restaurants. Move-in ready. He paused. I bought it this morning. The deed is in your name. No mortgage, no strings. Mateo, my voice broke. That's too much. A house in Brookline, that's $500,000, yes, which is less than 0.1% of my net worth. Vivienne, please, let me do this. You gave me a home when I had nothing. Let me give you one now. I turned to look at him. This man who'd been a terrified 10-year-old boy when I'd first met him. His eyes were Richard's eyes in that moment, full of steady, unwavering love. The kind of love that doesn't keep score. The kind I'd thought I'd given both my sons equally, but apparently had only taken root in one. Okay, I whispered. Okay, thank you. He pulled me into a hug, and I let myself cry against his shoulder, not for the house I'd lost or the possessions that had burned, but for the son I'd apparently never really had at all. The following Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the fire, Mateo told me he'd invited Dylan and Kristen to dinner at the penthouse. I was in the kitchen making tea when he mentioned it, and I nearly dropped the kettle. You did what? We need to have this conversation, Mateo said calmly, leaning against the counter with his arms crossed. He's been calling me non-stop, leaving voicemails, sending texts, showing up at Titan Shield's reception demanding to see you. Security has turned him away 3 times. This can't continue. So you invited him to dinner? My hands were shaking. Mateo, I don't want to see him. I can't, I'm not ready to. I know, but he's not going to stop until he gets what he wants, which is access to you. And I think it's time he understood exactly where things stand. Mateo's expression was carefully neutral, but I'd learned to read him over the years. He was planning something. Trust me on this. I won't let him hurt you. But some things need to be said face to face. So that evening, at 7 o'clock, my biological son walked into Mateo's penthouse with his wife beside him. Dylan was wearing one of his expensive suits, the kind he posted about on Instagram to prove his success. Kristen was in designer everything, her phone already out, presumably to document the billionaire's apartment for her followers. They looked like they were attending a networking event, not a family dinner. Dylan's eyes found me immediately. I was sitting on the couch in the living area, wearing one of the simple dresses Sarah had bought me, trying to look calmer than I felt. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Concern, maybe, or guilt, but it was gone so quickly I might have imagined it. "Mom," he started toward me, arms outstretched like he expected a hug. "Thank God. I've been so worried. When you didn't return my calls." "Sit down, Dylan." Mateo's voice cut through the false concern like a knife. He was standing near the dining table, which was set for 4. No food yet, just water glasses and cloth napkins. This wasn't going to be a long dinner. "Both of you, sit." Dylan's expression hardened. "I'm here to see my mother, not to take orders from you. Your mother is right there, and she's heard you. Now sit down or leave. Your choice." Mateo's tone left no room for argument. Kristen tugged at Dylan's sleeve, whispering something about not making a scene. They sat at the table, and after a moment, I forced myself to stand and join them. Mateo sat beside me, close enough that our shoulders almost touched, a united front. The silence was thick enough to choke on. Dylan kept looking at me, waiting for me to say something, to break the tension. But I couldn't find words. Every time I opened my mouth, I heard his voice from that phone call. "That's not my problem. Figure it out yourself." Finally, Mateo broke the silence. "Thank you for coming. I thought it was time we cleared the air about a few things." He pulled out a manila folder from beneath his placemat and opened it. "Let's start with this." He slid a document across the table. Dylan picked it up, scanning it, and I watched the color drain from his face. "Where did you get this?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Does it matter? What matters is what it says. That 3 weeks ago, you consulted with Henderson and Associates about having your mother declared mentally incompetent." Mateo's voice was perfectly calm, but there was steel underneath. "You wanted to take control of her finances, her property, her life. Under the guise of protection, of course, always such a caring son. I was just exploring options. She was struggling financially, I could see that, and I thought—" "You thought what, Dylan?" I found my voice, and it came out stronger than I expected. "That I needed you to take over my life? That I wasn't capable of managing my own affairs? Mom, you let your insurance lapse. Your house caught fire because you ignored maintenance issues. That's not rational behavior." He leaned forward, and his expression shifted into something that might have looked like concern to someone who didn't know better. "I was worried about you. I still am. Living here with him." He jerked his chin toward Mateo. "How do we know he's not taking advantage of you? Maybe he started the fire himself to look like a hero." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Kristen was nodding, backing him up. "It does seem convenient," she said in her sweet, vapid voice. "You refuse help for years. Then suddenly there's a fire, and you're living in a billionaire's penthouse. Some people might wonder about the timing." I stared at my daughter-in-law, this woman who'd never shown me anything but thinly veiled contempt, and something inside me snapped. "Get out! Mom, get out of this house right now!" I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. "How dare you come here and accuse Mateo of arson? He's the only person who helped me. The only one who answered the phone when I was standing on the sidewalk at 3 in the morning, watching my life burn. Where were you, Dylan? You were blocking my number so you wouldn't have to deal with me." "I didn't block," Dylan started, but Mateo cut him off. "Yes, you did. I have the phone records. You saw the fire reported in your neighborhood group chat at 2:58 a.m. Your mother called you at 2:43. You blocked her number at 3:21, after the fire trucks had already arrived. You knew, you watched, and you did nothing." Dylan's jaw worked, but no sound came out. Kristen was looking at him with something that might have been doubt. Good. Let her see him clearly for once. "Here's what's going to happen," Mateo continued, sliding more documents across the table. These are copies of the power of attorney documents Vivienne signed yesterday. I have full medical and financial authority. You're explicitly excluded. These are copies of the new trust documents for her assets. Again, you're not a beneficiary. And this," he pulled out a final document, "is a restraining order application. We haven't filed it yet, but we will if you continue to harass her." "You can't do this," Dylan said, but his voice lacked conviction. "She's my mother. You can't just take her away from me." "I'm not taking her anywhere." "You pushed her away all by yourself." Mateo stood up, walking around the table to stand behind Dylan's chair. "Let me tell you what I saw in the investigation. You inherited your father's life insurance payout 8 years ago, $50,000 that Richard left specifically to you, separate from the estate. Your mother didn't tell you that, did she? She wanted you to have it without strings. You spent it on a down payment for your house and a car for Kristen. Never once thought to help your mother with her mounting medical bills or property repairs." Dylan went white. "I didn't know she needed, because she didn't tell you, because she was protecting your feelings, trying not to be a burden, and you interpreted her pride as her not deserving your help." Mateo's voice dropped lower. "Meanwhile, every year for the past 8 years, your mother has donated $10,000 to the scholarship fund at your father's alma mater, in his name. Money she couldn't afford to give, because honoring your father's memory mattered more to her than her own financial security." I hadn't known Mateo knew about the scholarship donations. I'd never told him. He must have found out during the financial investigation. Tears were streaming down my face now, but I didn't wipe them away. "You had a mother who would have given you everything," Mateo said quietly, "and you gave her nothing when she needed you most. So no, Dylan, I'm not keeping her from you. You lost her all by yourself." Dylan stood abruptly, his chair falling backward. Kristen scrambled to her feet beside him. "You've poisoned her against me," he said, his voice shaking. "This is what you wanted all along, isn't it? To replace me, to be the real son." "I never wanted to replace you," Mateo said, and for the first time I heard pain in his voice. "I just wanted to be your brother." "But you couldn't see past your own resentment long enough to realize we were both lucky to have her." Dylan looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something crumble in his expression. Recognition, maybe. Understanding that he'd gone too far, pushed too hard, and there was no walking this back. "Mom," he said, and his voice cracked. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did." I wiped my eyes, straightening my shoulders. "You meant every word you said that night. Every dismissive comment over the years. Every time you chose to hurt me because you blamed me for loving someone else's child. You meant all of it, Dylan. And I'm done pretending otherwise." They left without another word. The door closed behind them with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than a slam. I stood in Mateo's pristine living room, surrounded by windows overlooking a city I was learning to call home again, and felt something shift inside me. Not grief, not anymore. Something closer to freedom. The next 3 weeks passed in a strange sort of peace. Mateo went back to his regular schedule, though he still worked from home more than usual, always checking in to make sure I'd eaten, slept, wasn't spiraling into depression. Sarah stopped by twice a week with things she thought I might need: books, specialty teas, a cashmere throw blanket that became my favorite possession. The lawyers moved forward with the negligence lawsuit against my landlord, and the preliminary numbers were staggering. 1.8 million in damages, they estimated. Possibly more. Dylan didn't call, didn't text. For the first time in my adult life, my son was completely absent, and the silence was both painful and liberating. I visited the new house in Brookline on a Thursday morning. Mateo came with me, and we walked through the empty rooms together, his shoes echoing on the hardwood floors. It was beautiful. Cream-colored walls, original crown molding, a kitchen with windows overlooking a garden that desperately needed attention. My fingers itched looking at that garden. I hadn't done landscape work in years, not since selling my business, but the urge to dig in soil and coax life from earth was still there. "What do you think?" Mateo asked as we stood in what would be my bedroom. It had a bay window with a built-in reading nook. "I think it's more than I deserve." "Stop that." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "You deserve this and more. When are you going to believe that?" I didn't have an answer. We spent another hour discussing furniture, paint colors, timeline for moving in. Sarah had already coordinated with an interior designer who specialized in mature, elegant aesthetics, her words, which made me laugh for the first time in weeks. By the time we left, I could almost picture myself living there, building a new life in those rooms, maybe even being happy again. We were pulling into the parking garage beneath Mateo's building when his phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his expression darkened. "It's Kristen. Don't answer it. I'm curious what she wants." He accepted the call and put it on speaker as we rode the elevator up. "Kristen, this is unexpected. I need to talk to Vivienne." Her voice was different from the last time I'd heard it. Smaller, less sure of itself. "Please, it's important." Mateo looked at me, eyebrows raised. I didn't want to talk to her, didn't want to hear more accusations or manipulation, but something in her tone made me nod. "I'm here," I said. "What do you want?" "I need to see you. In person. There are things you need to know about Dylan, about what's been happening. Things I—" Her voice cracked. "I can't do this over the phone. Please. I know I don't deserve your time, but this is important." Mateo was already shaking his head, but I found myself saying, "Come to the penthouse. Tomorrow at 2. Mateo will be here." "Thank you. Thank you. I'll be there." She hung up quickly, like she was afraid I'd change my mind. "This is a bad idea," Mateo said as we entered the apartment. "She's going to try to manipulate you, play on your sympathy." "Probably, but I want to hear what she has to say." I set my purse down on the counter. "And you'll be here to keep me from agreeing to anything stupid." He didn't look convinced, but he didn't argue further. Kristen arrived the next day at exactly 2 o'clock, and she looked nothing like the polished influencer who'd walked into this apartment 3 weeks ago. No makeup, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, jeans and a sweater that had seen better days. She was holding a large envelope in hands that shook visibly. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "I know you have no reason to trust me. I wouldn't trust me either." We sat in the living area, me on the couch, Mateo in the chair beside me, Kristen perched on the edge of the opposite couch, like she might bolt at any moment. She set the envelope on the coffee table, but didn't open it yet. "I left Dylan," she said abruptly. 4 days ago. I packed my things while he was at work and moved back to my sister's apartment. I filed for divorce yesterday. I blinked, surprised despite myself. "Why?" "Because I finally saw what he really is, what we both were." She took a shaky breath. "That dinner here, when Mateo showed us all those documents, everything Dylan had been planning. I told myself he was just looking out for you, that it was concern, not greed. But then we got home that night and he—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "He was furious, not at himself for what he'd done, but at Mateo for exposing it, at you for choosing the immigrant over your own blood." His words. And he started planning. "Planning what?" Mateo leaned forward, suddenly very alert. Kristen reached for the envelope and pulled out a stack of printed emails, contesting the power of attorney, claiming undue influence, diminished capacity, emotional manipulation. He found a lawyer willing to argue that Mateo coerced you into signing those documents while you were traumatized and vulnerable. He was going to file next week. My stomach dropped. Mateo took the emails from her, scanning them quickly, his jaw tightening with each page. "There's more," Kristen continued. "He hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on Mateo, looking for anything. Tax issues, business dealings, personal scandals. Anything he could use to prove Mateo was an unsuitable guardian for you." She pulled out more papers. "He also contacted 3 of your neighbors from the old house. He was trying to get them to sign affidavits saying you'd seemed confused lately, forgetful, possibly showing signs of dementia." "That's insane," I whispered. "I don't have dementia. I'm 57 years old." "I know. But Dylan was building a case, and he convinced himself it was the right thing to do. That Mateo had brainwashed you, that he was after your money." She laughed bitterly. "Your money, as if Mateo needs your money when he's worth billions. But Dylan couldn't see past his own greed and resentment." Mateo was reading through the documents with increasing fury. He was going to argue emotional abuse, claiming I isolated you from your family, controlled your finances, created dependence. He looked up at Kristen. "Why are you telling us this?" "Because it's wrong. Because I've been complicit in his cruelty for 3 years and I'm done. Tears were streaming down her face now. I grew up poor, Mrs. Hartwell. My dad worked construction. My mom cleaned houses. I had 5 siblings, and we shared bedrooms and wore hand-me-downs, and I was so ashamed of where I came from. When I met Dylan, he seemed successful, sophisticated, like a ticket to the life I wanted. And he told me these stories about how his mother favored a charity case over him, spent his inheritance on a stranger's kid. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because it justified my own shallow reasons for marrying him. She wiped her eyes roughly. But then I watched you stand on the sidewalk at 3 a.m. after losing everything, and your first instinct was to call your son for help. Not for money, not for a handout, just for a safe place to sleep. And he laughed at you. I heard him laugh, and I told myself it was fine, that you'd been a bad mother, that you deserved it. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then, that dinner here, when Mateo showed us what you'd really done, the scholarship donations, the insurance money Dylan inherited, all of it, I realized Dylan had been lying to me, to himself, to everyone. I didn't know what to say. This woman who'd been nothing but hostile to me for years was sitting in front of me, crying, handing over documents that would protect me from her husband's schemes. The final straw was 2 nights ago, Kristen continued. Dylan was drunk, ranting about how Mateo had stolen his mother. And he said, her voice dropped to almost a whisper, he said he wished the fire had been worse, that if you'd been hurt badly enough, you would have needed him, and then Mateo couldn't have played hero. He was angry that you'd escaped unharmed. His own mother. The words hung in the air like something toxic. Mateo stood abruptly, walking to the window, his hands clenched into fists. I sat frozen, trying to process what I'd just heard. My son, the baby I'd nursed, the toddler I'd rocked to sleep, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, had wished the fire had hurt me more. I have more, Kristen said softly, pulling out the last document from the envelope. This is a full accounting of Dylan's finances. He's been embezzling from his real estate clients. Small amounts, usually from estate sales where elderly clients wouldn't notice. He's taken about $200,000 over the past 3 years. I found the records on his laptop. I made copies of everything. Mateo turned around slowly. You're willing to testify to all of this? Yes. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make this right. Kristen looked at me directly for the first time. Mrs. Hartwell, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. For every snide comment, every dismissive look, every time I encouraged Dylan's worst impulses. I was raised better than this. My mother would be ashamed of who I became. I studied this young woman who'd been my enemy for 3 years. She was 29 years old, barely older than Mateo, and she'd gotten caught up in Dylan's bitterness until it consumed her too. But she was here now, risking his fury, giving us everything we needed to protect ourselves. Why now? I asked quietly. What changed? I'm pregnant. The words came out in a rush. 8 weeks. I found out last week, and I realized I'm going to be someone's mother. And if I'm going to be any good at it, I can't be the person who stood by while Dylan tried to destroy his own mother. I can't let my child learn that kind of cruelty. She pressed a hand to her still flat stomach. Dylan doesn't know. I'm not telling him. This baby deserves better than a father who wishes harm on his own family. Something in my chest cracked open. This girl, and she was a girl really, despite being almost 30, was choosing to be alone and pregnant rather than stay with a man who'd proven himself cruel. She was trying to break the cycle before her child even entered the world. Thank you, I said, and meant it, for bringing this to us, for choosing differently. She nodded, crying harder now. Mateo sat back down, his expression thoughtful. I'll have my lawyers review everything you've brought. The embezzlement evidence, we'll need to report that. His clients deserve to know. I understand. I expected that. Kristen stood, clutching her empty envelope. There's one more thing. Dylan's been talking to his Uncle Michael, Richard's brother. They're planning something together, some way to challenge the trust and the power of attorney. Michael has money, connections. He's funding Dylan's legal fight because he never approved of you taking in Mateo. He thinks the family money should stay in the bloodline. Mateo and I exchanged glances. Michael. I hadn't spoken to Richard's brother in 8 years. Not since he'd called Mateo my charity project at a family barbecue. Of course he was involved in this. Of course he'd encouraged Dylan's worst impulses. When are they planning to file? Mateo asked. Monday, day after tomorrow. Michael's lawyer has everything ready. Kristen moved toward the door. I should go. I've taken enough of your time. The documents are all there. Everything you need to defend yourself. Kristen. I stood, walking over to her. When's your baby due? July 15th. She smiled weakly. I'm terrified. You should be. Parenthood is terrifying. I hesitated, then continued. But if you ever need anything, advice, help, someone to talk to, you have my number. Use it. Her eyes widened. After everything I've done to you, you're making different choices now. That matters. I touched her shoulder briefly. Good luck. With everything. She left quietly, and I returned to the couch, feeling exhausted. Mateo was already on his phone, texting his lawyers, his security team, setting things in motion. Always protecting. Always 3 steps ahead. We need to file first, he said, not looking up from his phone. Beat Dylan and Michael to the punch. I'm calling Judge Morrison. She owes me a favor from the Richardson case. We'll get an emergency hearing for tomorrow. Present all of Kristen's evidence, get an injunction preventing Dylan from filing any guardianship or competency claims. Mateo. I waited until he looked at me. What's the end game here? Legal battles, investigations, restraining orders. Where does it end? It ends when you're safe, when Dylan can't hurt you anymore. His expression was fierce. I'm not letting him take anything else from you. Not your dignity, not your peace, not your future. He's done, Vivienne. After tomorrow, he'll be too busy defending himself from embezzlement charges to come after you. He's still my son. I know. Mateo's voice softened, and I know that hurts. But he stopped being your son the moment he put his greed above your safety. You didn't fail him. He failed you, and he's going to face the consequences of that. We spent the rest of the evening preparing for the hearing. Mateo's lawyers arrived at 6 with briefcases full of documents, and we went through everything line by line. The incompetency filing, the embezzlement evidence, the private investigator reports showing Dylan's attempts to manufacture evidence of my dementia, Michael's financial backing, all of it painting a picture of coordinated cruelty from my own family. By midnight, I was numb. Too much information, too much betrayal, too much pain compressed into too few weeks. Mateo sent the lawyers home and made me chamomile tea, which I drank without tasting. We sat in his living room in the dark, looking out at the city lights, not speaking. I keep thinking about when he was little, I finally said. Dylan, I mean. He was such a sweet child, affectionate, curious, kind to animals. I don't understand when it all went wrong. Maybe it didn't go wrong. Maybe this is who he always was underneath, and he just got better at hiding it as he got older. Mateo shifted beside me. Or maybe losing his father broke something in him that couldn't be fixed. Either way, Vivienne, you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You taught me that when I was 16 and trying to help that kid from school who kept self-destructing. Remember? You said sometimes all you can do is love people from a distance and hope they figure it out. I remembered. A boy named Marcus who'd reminded me of Mateo, another kid from a broken home. But Marcus had chosen drugs and petty crime, and Mateo had nearly gotten arrested trying to help him. I'd told Mateo he couldn't save everyone, especially people who didn't want saving. I hate that you're using my own wisdom against me, I said. But there was no heat in it. Someone has to. You're terrible at taking your own advice. We sat in comfortable silence until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore. Mateo walked me to the guest room, though it felt less like a guest room and more like home now, and hugged me goodnight. Tomorrow we fight, he said, and we win. Get some sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how my life had become a legal battle against my own son. But underneath the pain, underneath the exhaustion, there was something else, something that felt almost like relief, because maybe Mateo was right. Maybe some people couldn't be saved, and maybe it was finally time to stop trying. The emergency hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. Saturday morning in Judge Morrison's chambers. Mateo wore one of his power suits, the kind that cost more than a used car. I wore a simple navy dress that Sarah had picked out, pearls that had been my mother's, sensible heels. We looked like what we were, a successful businessman and a respectable older woman, not the incompetent elderly victim Dylan wanted to paint me as. Judge Morrison was a sharp-eyed woman in her mid-60s who'd known Mateo since his company had helped the court system upgrade its cybersecurity 3 years ago. She reviewed our emergency petition with the efficiency of someone who'd seen every manipulation tactic in the book and wasn't impressed by any of them. Dylan arrived 20 minutes late with Michael and a lawyer I didn't recognize. My son looked terrible. Unshaven, rumpled suit, eyes red-rimmed. Michael looked smug. Their lawyer looked expensive and overconfident. The hearing took 90 minutes. Mateo's team presented everything: the incompetency consultation documents, Kristen's testimony provided via notarized affidavit, the embezzlement evidence, the private investigator reports, the timeline showing Dylan had blocked my number during the fire. Dylan's lawyer tried to argue coercion, undue influence, gold digging on Mateo's part. Judge Morrison cut him off 3 times for making assertions without evidence. When it was over, she took off her reading glasses and looked directly at Dylan. "Mr. Hartwell, I've been on the bench for 22 years. I've seen family disputes that would make your hair curl, but I have rarely seen such a calculated campaign to exploit a parent's vulnerability for financial gain." She held up the embezzlement documents. "I'm referring these to the district attorney's office. I'm also issuing a permanent injunction preventing you from filing any competency, guardianship, or conservatorship petitions regarding your mother, and I'm awarding Mrs. Hartwell full attorney's fees." Dylan's lawyer started to object, but Judge Morrison wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm ordering that you and Mr. Michael Hartwell be added to a no-contact provision regarding Mrs. Vivienne Hartwell. You will not call, text, visit, or communicate with her in any way unless she initiates contact. Violation will result in contempt charges." She signed the order with a flourish. "This hearing is concluded." We walked out of that courthouse into bright October sunshine, and I felt something lift off my shoulders that had been weighing me down for years, maybe decades. The constant fear of not being enough, not doing enough, not loving enough to fix whatever was broken in my relationship with Dylan. It was done. The judge had drawn a line, and I was finally free to stop crossing it. "How do you feel?" Mateo asked as we settled into his car. "Lighter," I said honestly. "Is that terrible? To feel relieved that my own son is legally forbidden from contacting me?" "It's human. You're allowed to protect yourself." He started the engine. "The DA's office will probably file embezzlement charges within the week. Dylan's going to have bigger problems than trying to steal your money. And Michael? Judge Morrison is smart. She saw him for what he is, a bitter man who never forgave you for choosing compassion over bloodline purity. The no-contact order covers him too." Mateo glanced over at me. "You're safe now. Really safe." 3 months later, I was unpacking the last box in my new house in Brookline. The interior designer had done beautiful work. Elegant, but comfortable. Sophisticated, but warm. My bedroom had the reading nook I'd fallen in love with. The kitchen had windows overlooking the garden I'd spent the past month rehabilitating. I'd hired 2 apprentice landscapers from the local community college, young people who wanted to learn the trade, and together we'd transformed that overgrown mess into something beautiful. Not finished, gardens never are, but alive again. Growing. The settlement from the negligence lawsuit had come through. $1.8 million. Just as the lawyers predicted. More money than I knew what to do with. I'd set up a scholarship fund at MIT in Carla Rivera's name. Full ride awards for children of immigrants studying engineering or computer science. $50,000 a year in perpetuity. Mateo had cried when I told him. I'd also started volunteering at a local immigrant support center, helping families navigate housing issues and financial planning. Turned out 25 years of managing a household and a business had given me skills people needed. Who knew? Dylan was awaiting trial on 6 counts of embezzlement. Kristen had given birth to a baby girl in July and named her Carla. She sent me a photo from the hospital, and I'd sent back a handmade baby quilt and a note saying I meant what I'd said about being available if she needed anything. We weren't close, might never be close, but we'd made peace. Michael had disappeared from my life as completely as if he'd never existed. Good riddance. And Mateo. Mateo stopped by every Thursday for dinner, just like he'd been doing for years, except now he came to my house instead of the other way around. We cooked together, laughed together, argued about politics and books, and whether the garden needed more roses. He'd started calling me Mom about 6 weeks after the hearing. Just once, tentatively, asking if it was okay. I'd hugged him and cried and said it was more than okay. It was overdue by about 24 years. On a Saturday in late November, exactly 1 year after the fire, I was in my garden planting spring bulbs when I heard a car door slam. I looked up to see a familiar figure walking up my driveway. Dylan, thinner than I remembered, grayer. He stopped at the edge of my property line, hands in his pockets, not crossing into my yard. We looked at each other across 15 feet and a lifetime of damage. I could call the police. He was violating the no-contact order. But something in his posture, defeated, lost, made me set down my trowel and stand up. "I'm not supposed to be here," he said. His voice was hoarse. "I know that. I'll leave if you want, but I needed to say something." I didn't speak, just waited. "I'm sorry." The words came out barely above a whisper. For all of it, the fire, the incompetency filing, the things I said, you deserved better. You always deserved better. He swallowed hard. "I blamed you for everything that was wrong in my life. For Dad dying, for not being rich, for loving Mateo. And none of it was your fault. It was easier to be angry at you than to admit I was angry at myself for not being enough, for not being him. Dylan, I'm going to prison, probably 18 months. My lawyer got it down to a plea deal, but I'm going." He laughed bitterly. "Kristen left me. Michael won't return my calls. I lost my real estate license. I lost everything. And the worst part is knowing I deserve all of it. That I did this to myself. I wanted to feel triumph, vindication. This was the justice I'd been owed. But standing in my garden, looking at my son, my broken, lost son, I just felt sad. Sad for the little boy he'd been. Sad for the man he'd become. Sad for all the years we'd wasted. "I can't forgive you yet," I said quietly. "Maybe I will someday. Maybe I won't. But I don't hate you, Dylan. I can't have you in my life right now. Maybe not ever." He nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand. I just wanted you to know. I finally understand what I lost. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mom." He turned and walked back to his car, drove away. I stood in my garden watching until his taillights disappeared, and then I went inside, washed my hands, and called Mateo. "He came by," I said when he answered. "Dylan," he apologized. "How do you feel?" Always his first question, always checking on my emotional state. Sad, relieved, ready to move forward. I looked around my kitchen, at the life I'd built from ashes and loss and unexpected grace. "I think I'm finally okay, Mateo. Really okay." "Good. That's good." I could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm bringing Thai food for dinner Thursday. The good place, not the mediocre one near my office." "Perfect. I'll make that coconut cake you like." "You don't have to." "I want to. You're my son. Let me feed you." A pause. Then softly, "I love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart." After we hung up, I stood at my kitchen window watching the late afternoon sun slant through my garden. The bulbs I'd planted would bloom in spring, daffodils and tulips and hyacinth. New life coming from dormant potential buried in dark soil. It felt like a metaphor, though I was trying not to be too precious about it. My house had burned down. My son had betrayed me. I'd lost almost everything I owned in a single night. But standing in my kitchen in Brookline, in a house given to me by a boy I'd saved 24 years ago who'd grown up to save me back, I realized I hadn't lost everything. I'd lost the wrong things and kept the right ones. Family wasn't blood. It was showing up. It was choosing each other again and again, even when, especially when, it was hard. It was a 10-year-old orphan who'd become a 34-year-old man who landed a helicopter in the middle of smoke and chaos and said 3 words that changed everything. "You're coming home. I'd come home." And I was finally at peace.